Keys to the Commonwealth, a podcast where we share the real stories of local community members who are using real estate to build personal wealth, along with tips and tricks from professionals across the industry. And now, your host, Landry Fields.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth episode. Landry Fields here, and I am excited today for our next guest, which is my business partner in real estate. He is a local, born and raised creeker, or I don't know. Again, how do
Creek
they say
dog.
It? Creek dog.
That's right.
From Taste Creek High School, went to UK where he graduated. We've been friends for quite a few years with the same passions in some faith stuff, as well as bourbon, as well as Reds baseball, unfortunately, and then Wildcats and so forth. So we go quite a ways back, and have been entertaining conversation with jumping into real estate for quite some time. And so I think the goal of today's episode is really so we can kind of hopefully give encouragement to anybody still wanting to make that jump, because we obviously, as we will tell you, knew nothing going in when we first kind of started down this journey, and just hopefully give you a lot of confidence to sometimes make that, and again, in a smart way, talk to your own financial advisors or other people like that. But, in a smart way, going into a partnership together where we jumped into real estate, haven't looked back, are very grateful that for the opportunities that came about. We're going to tell you about some of those, which are crazy in some respects, but and so hopefully give you some confidence in that respect. So he's married to his beautiful bride. They have a dog named Olive, and we are excited for them as they are expecting their first son come in September. Yep, September. So it is my pleasure to welcome Andrew Jarvis to the Keys to Commonwealth studio.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man. So jump back in the DeLorean here, and obviously it's only been 3-4 months. I mean, it's been longer than that in that sense, but what got us into real estate here?
Yeah, so like you said, it was longer than 3 months ago. We both kind of had an itch, I think, and approached each other around the same time. Hey, this real estate thing, let's start learning about that. And so, like everyone else in the world, we thought, well, let's do short-term rentals in Gatlinburg. And then we found out everyone else in the world was doing that also. And so that took a lot of twists and turns. But it was months of, I think, research and study, and thankful for all the resources out there, obviously, now. So
what made you, I had an itch from... Obviously, I work in insurance, and I started seeing, and some friends that had real estate, but it was, I think, really that when I jumped into insurance is that it really started seeing how many people had rental property out there. And I was like, man, I feel like I got to jump on this thing. Then, of course, I read The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that everyone apparently has read in some respects. And then I think it's an interesting point in time right now with inflation. I think it's an even more a deeper conversation, bigger conversation than I think a lot of people are asking themselves or wanting to look into. As things are changing out there in the industry, but the world. It's definitely changed a lot from what is viable options for investing and so forth. And so I think this is a good conversation to have, and again, hopefully give some people some confidence to take that jump if they've been waiting on the sidelines to do so. So, what got you interested in real estate? That was kind of my story. But.
Yeah, I think it was kind of twofold. I think, so my father-in-law is a retired builder. He retired right before COVID. And I remember when I met my wife and we started dating and obviously got married, I was just fascinated by his profession. I loved the idea of taking something and creating this beautiful space for people to live in from the ground up. I loved that he kind of made his own schedule and the flexibility, and he was in control. And I would love picking his brain, what's going on in your job, this, et cetera. So that was fascinating. And then I've been in public education the last 12 years, and it's been a wonderful career. I've loved it. But just obviously drawn to being your own boss, taking the skills of customer service and, just leadership that have treated me well in education, but then applying those into something that, there's passion for. It opens so many doors for your family, like I said, financial freedom, flexibility, et cetera. And so was drawn to those ideas. And like I said, we both kind of, I think, started feeling the itch around the same time, which led to those initial conversations of, hey, we get along pretty well most of the time. So maybe we would be good partners in this.
Yeah, and choosing your partner is a big deal in that sense, because there are a lot of things can go wrong. And, we're still friends at this point in time.
As of this recording.
And I feel like the first 3 or 4 months was probably the most hectic headache part anyway. So I think we've at least gone through the major wave of getting into it. But no, we work really well together as far as that. I'm not a trusting individual sometimes as far as accomplishing goals or tasks or other things like that. And so it's been great working obviously with you in that sense for knowing I can just trust you as more of the property manager side of that. So, there's a lot of people that do that with they'll have a partnerships, where one person maybe takes a lead or gets compensated differently for property managing. Whereas, like for me, obviously, I have no time for property managing when I run an entire insurance agency at the same time. But yeah, so that's been great. But yeah, we kind of jumped that. We were having these conversations. I feel like we had these conversations for probably, just mentioning it for a year, 2 years?
I would say, I was thinking a year to 18 months at least of the initial like dreaming and where could this lead to, and then kind of the initial, here are the resources, let's kind of both start doing our own research, et cetera. And
then it really got kind of, we got really started getting into the weeds, researching probably about fall? Was it fall?
I want to say it was fall, and we kind of had the goal of at the new year we want to start.
Fall of 2021.
Yes. And the goal was the new year to really start to move on that first acquisition. Didn't necessarily go down the path we initially thought.
So, where'd we start?
Gatlinburg, short-term rental.
But everyone's buying. It's a sure win there, right?
Yeah. You watch all these videos on YouTube, and they're like, I'm making $80,000 a month, whatever, some crazy number. I was like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. Unfortunately, so did everyone else. And so everyone was a cash offer down there. Right. And we clearly were not all cash offers. Not quite there yet, yeah.
And real estate obviously jumped up here, but everything down there, I think it was like a matter of 12 months had literally doubled in what people were paying prices for. It was something, right?
It was, yeah. If not, it was close to it for sure.
Which was just insane. But I mean, people were still profitable, but I think it was definitely harder to come by. And before we started recording, I actually totally forgot. So like we fully went down this road. We didn't just
it wasn't just exactly. It was, we were all in.
Like we got bankers down in there that were working with us, a realtor.
Made an offer on a property.
That's what I forgot. Yeah. I forgot we made an offer and we're a backup.
We were the runner-up. Yeah, we were this close to actually owning a property down there.
And thank the Lord for we did not get that property in some respects, because when I say it was crazy down there, things are here crazy a bit here, but down there it was like you had to put up to win an offer without all cash. Like I said, I completely forgot about this. I remember we had to put up some kind of stupid amount of earnest money, right? Non-refundable earnest money,
exactly. Which made the wives very nervous.
Yes, I mean I don't want to even really say, but it was a
substantial amount,
five-figure non-refundable earnest money that if we won the policy and backed out of the deal, obviously we would lose. Right. I mean, the one we did make it, I still have good feelings about that. We did. I don't think we would have erred, but it was, now thinking about it, even more so being in it, I'm like, good Lord, thankfully we didn't get into that. I mean, it seems so.
Which I think is why a partnership can be so beneficial when you jump in, because I think we both have personalities that when we put our mind on something, we're going to go achieve it. Yeah. And so I think it would have been easy individually to kind of go crazy on the first offer. But I think when we're together, we kind of feel responsible for the other one as well. Yes. And so we balance each other out, and we're patient. It was an offer. It was an expensive property, but it was something like you said, that was going to be beneficial, was going to cash flow. It wasn't going to be. Yeah.
And I think the thing is, it was our first one. So that's probably the part about thankfully it didn't work out in the first one. And again, it could still work. We could have built out the team there, but it would have been so much harder not knowing what we know now.
Exactly.
To try to do stuff there as far as building out a team. Trusting people, it can be done for sure, but I think having experience ahead of time before you're doing any of that kind of scenario would have been helpful. So in that way, I'm also grateful that did not work out.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's interesting because that was such a big deal, and like you said, I had completely forgotten about some of the terms around it. But I also don't think we
documented now in this podcast.
That's right. We never forget. I don't think we would have been able to scale. You mentioned that we're getting ready to.
That's a good point.
Purchase another property. I think that would have been kind of the one in, and all of our focus would have been on building that team, and we probably would have been a little strapped for a little bit. And so I don't think we would have been able to scale at the same rate that we have been able to. Or
just think about the short-term market down there. I mean, loan-wise, we quickly figured out with bankers and things like that. Some of them are coming around, I've heard, but a lot of them, they don't want to look at necessarily the short-term aspect of it, even though usually you're making more money in that sense, but they still want to base it on long-term renters type income. Right.
Right.
So that changes things. That changes the valuation of the property in a lot of ways and so forth. And yeah, I don't think it would have allowed us to scale like we did.
And I think being new investors too, they're a little more cautious. Finding that bank that was willing to take a chance on us here was a big deal.
Yeah.
And see that, hey, we're not just like every American that's trying to invest and just throw money towards something. We're doing this, in a smart way. It's going to be profitable. But yeah, it was difficult to jump in down there. And so I'm really glad, like you said, the Lord kind of led us to a different.
And if I had tried to approach a bank here, being like, I own an insurance agency and now I want to buy a bunch of real estate at one time like we did, I mean, I feel like the bank would have had that's the other thing, getting in with relationships with the local banks is such a key. And we've heard that theme throughout this podcast with people when their story when they first got into the business. So shout out to Bank of the Bluegrass there for that.
Our guy, Chris.
Yes. But so yeah, we kind of started to pivot a little bit, and then I kind of forgot all about this because it's been a whirlwind of 3 months. Then we were like, okay, maybe we'll look, instead of cabins in Gatlinburg, we're like, maybe we could look at cabins in the Gorge.
I skipped that step as well. Yeah, there was a Gorge session, and it wasn't just we thought maybe we could purchase something.
Yeah.
And then that did not seem to be available quickly. So then we had this idea that we were going to build, perhaps, which, we thought my father-in-law's experience, and, we could make connections, whatever. So we actually drove down there and looked at property. Almost got stuck in the mud, which was fun. So that was crazy. We thought about purchasing and maybe developing, but that was going to be, again, quite a large undertaking, especially having not a lot of connections down there. You have maybe a couple, but as far as like the building team and then, trying to do that from far away. And it wasn't just the particular property we looked at wasn't going to be just a single build. It was going to be kind of our own development. So we went from 0 to 100, I think, on that idea. We were going to, have our little Gorge dynasty down there. But
so theme though being like, definitely don't give up in the sense of like finding where those doors open. So from that point, we really had not really looked at the Lexington market a ton at that point. We were kind of blinded to just looking at short-term rental for that time initial, because we were like, there's a lot more money that usually can be made in that sense. There's a lot more work. But then, we started really running your numbers. I mean, we really honestly, that whole time really prepared us for learning how to run numbers as far as that goes. Honestly, learning the debt to income ratio scenarios and everything regarding the banks and so forth. So we really didn't know that prior.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
I mean, that was huge.
It really not trained us, but.
Yeah, and I think we were drawn to short-term rental, like you said, for cash flow. And who isn't, right? Who doesn't want cash flow, especially in today's market? But, for me, wanting to maybe move out of education eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, and find other outlets in real estate, that seemed to make the most sense. But I think the key being embracing the learning process, like you said. We've learned so much through every one that didn't work out. I think you could take a lesson from Gatlinburg, from the Gorge, or multiple lessons from each time, and it really prepared us for, getting to where we're at now.
And so we had learned to kind of look at markets. We had to kind of adjust a little bit in looking at the market from a long-term rental standpoint. Obviously, you look at it differently. But we're like, you know what? Okay, maybe let's look at what I think, honestly, maybe there was more me than you. You tell me. But I think I remember definitely being like very opposed to multifamily at the beginning.
I think neither one of you. Well, I think there's can be a negative connotation around multifamily, and so I think we were both like, I think sometimes you think the worst when you think multifamily, and so I don't think we were. You're looking at luxury cabins in Gatlinburg. It seemed like a different thing to own multifamily in Lexington, right?
Right.
And so at some point, and I give Bigger Pockets a big, and several resources out there, kind of a big plus for why we were drawn to it. But just you had to learn about it, I think, and learn about the cash flow potential, learn about it. It could be kind of a happy marriage in between. But it was, as with everything in this, it was a process. It wasn't like, let's go buy a duplex or two, starting out.
Right. So I mean, it really taught us a lot. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the time. I mean, so we're looking at, coming a year more of dreaming, and then probably ended up being 6 months probably between when we really started the process before we finally landed on our first deal, which we were able to use some of the realtor connections and so forth, and discovered what we were told was a duplex. Do you remember that?
I do, and it was crazy because it was not long before that, because it was actually one of your connections that brought it to us, but it was not long before that I had really kind of started leaning in the multifamily route. And I don't even think we maybe had one passing conversation about it, but hadn't really sat down and said, hey, let's focus on this area. And then you just texted me randomly like, hey, my realtor connection just sent me this, and we thought it was one.
So we hadn't really talked about, we kind of started looking at the Lexington market, I think, right?
We had started to say, hey, let's do it local on the first.
No, that's what it is. We had a conversation. Let's start maybe looking at multifamily. I texted a realtor buddy of mine.
Yeah.
He literally texts me right back and says, oh, I've got this one where they've been updating it and they're going to get ready to put it on the market.
Well, in
a matter of we made the decision, let's start looking at multifamily, and immediately, here's one we're going to be going to look at, I think, within literally 24 hours.
And hopefully that's encouraging to the listener too, that all those disappointments took months, right?
Yeah.
But then it can be just, the snap of a fingers that one can work out.
But we were ready. We knew we weren't quite ready on the banking side here, but we thankfully had some time to work that out because we had banking relationships elsewhere, but we hadn't fully figured it out here in Lexington.
We understood how the pre-approval process worked. We'd been through that multiple times, and you had done your research on local lenders that would be better for investment property. So we knew at least where, we weren't just flying blind and let's reach out to every bank we know. We kind of knew which direction we wanted to go. But we were prepared for it. So we were able to make an offer pretty quick. Well, let's go look at it first, which we thought was...
So we show up to the duplex.
Yeah.
And they got a tenant in one. They got one that they're renovating. Doesn't look bad. Looks decent. Eastland area of town, and where I don't think either of us were as familiar with that area. Maybe at that point,
I have very little experience over there.
But it's definitely it was an up and coming area that is getting renovated a lot with the new high school. You got the new hospital out there.
Yep.
Coming. You've got the soccer stadium that I believe from conversations I've had is going in there near the Fasig-Tipton area, and so forth. So I think there's a lot happening in that north side of town as Lexington's kind of expanding out towards the interstate more and more, just beyond Hamburg only, but. We show up and we're looking at it and they're like, well, actually the one next door is owned and that one's going to be for sale. And that was already updated. Both units were updated, right? And then they both filled. So we had 3 tenants and the 4th tenant, they were updating that one and they were selling it. So they're like, so now all of a sudden we're like, okay, do we do we go crazy and try to buy 2 duplexes at the same time?
Well, they had both been bought by out-of-state investors, and what they were doing is as the lease came up, they were fixing that one unit at a time. So they had owned it for a short period of time, but kind of updating one at a time.
I mean, 18 months they probably owned it?
Something like that. Yeah, I think as each lease came up, they came in a short amount of time and flipped them. Cosmetic updates, flooring, paint, et cetera. And so we started looking at the numbers, and it was like, well, if we buy one and we fill both and it goes well, which we think it will, then we're going to cash flow a little bit. If we buy the second one as well, then we're kind of safe. We're protected. If there's a period of time where we're fixing one up or one's vacant, we're still protecting ourselves with the 3. And then the 4th would kind of be bonus cash flow, which we thought, as crazy as this sounds, it's actually going to be safer for us. Here's where our conservative financial background came in. Safer for us if we bought both of them. Some people who listen to this like, you're stupid. But that's okay,
Oh, it gets worse. Here, just wait.
So we were like, why don't we do it? If we can make it work numbers-wise, and if the bank is crazy enough to lend these new investors money, why don't we purchase both? We'll actually be covered and protected going into it. And so, what we thought was a cabin in Gatlinburg then turned into 2 duplexes. Well,
which then changed our scenario of looking at, instead of which we were kind of looking at all our options between conventional versus commercial. And so obviously this kind of made the way more for like, okay, we need to go commercial.
Right.
So, and that's been great working with Bank of Bluegrass and that. Shout out to Josh Harmon, who's been on this podcast, who gave us that connection.
That's exactly right.
He's with Guaranteed Rate. Go check him out.
He's also a great softball player. That's how I met Josh. Yeah, back in the day.
Okay. And so we kind of went through all that process. We had time because they were updating. It was going to be like a month or so before it was going to be kind of ready in that sense, right? And so did all our numbers, yada, yada. They gave us the green light. I think we had some people we were able to call to say, hey, give us the good word. I think that's part where us being a partnership helped in that they knew our backgrounds of, like I said, I run a business myself, if you can do middle school band, you can do anything as far as
I think
managing.
My W-2 income was helpful also.
Yes, we both had W-2s. That helped and stuff like that. It wasn't anything, honestly, it would probably take less management in some respect, well, maybe we thought, than short-term rental in that sense, which can be obviously a lot more demand as far as if you're self-managing.
Right.
But I remember we got everything approved. We were like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And that was a terrifying feeling in some respects, right? We got into this point and all this work, and you're like,
I get
is this going to happen now?
Go across the finish line, right? Is an interesting feeling for sure.
So we got everything approved. So we got the offer accepted. Pretty much paid what they were asking for, which was fine. And then,
well, then it gets real crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we offered a little under, but it hadn't hit market, so we didn't really think they were going to accept.
Did we offer under?
Very low. I think it was like 10 or 20,000 under the asking. They came back and were like, no, we can't do that. And so we presented what was going to be their asking price, and so they accepted. And so we thought, okay, it's not like a grand slam, but it's a single that gets us in the game. Which then, of course, in the financing
and to that point, a single gets you in the game and on base. So that's all we were looking for.
We just wanted in the game.
All you should be looking for if you've never been in real estate before.
Yeah, I think analysis paralysis. You've heard that said a lot. You're waiting for that grand slam deal, and in today's market, that give me a bunch of singles and let's score runs that way.
Go old school.
That can lead to whole
not like the new kids with the home runs or bust.
That's right. So then, of course, that leads to the appraisal, and we thought, we were sitting here talking like, please just appraise for what we offered.
Hold that thought though.
Okay.
Because before we got the appraisal back is when we also the other thing is, so we got everything. We're waiting for the appraisal, right? Hoping that everything checks out. We also needed with the commercial loans, we could also sometimes leverage additional capital to kind of make some improvements, kind of a scenario. Right. They were improved, but there was a couple that didn't have ACs. And so we were able to work with the bank to kind of say, if we add ACs, and that helped the value of the overall. I don't know how there was no, there used to be ACs. It was a whole thing, but at one time it looked like. But anyway, we got two duplexes. They sit next door to each other, and there's a third one identical that sits next door to those two. And
I think I said to you at some point, like, hey, we should reach out to the owner and see.
Right.
And it looks like it needs fixed up too. Let's reach out to them and see if they want to sell. Maybe they're tired of owning whatever.
And that was the goal. And we were like, okay, we'll get these two, and then we'd love to kind of figure out who owns that one and get it.
Right.
And I'm sitting. No, we haven't gotten the appraisal back on the other two. I'm sitting in an S&S tire getting my tire changed. I'm normally not on the real estate, the Facebook Bluegrass
Real Estate Investors Group.
Real Estate Investors Group. Was not normally on that site, just because I'm so busy usually during the day. And I'm just happen to be on there, and all of a sudden it pops up. I mean, this is the craziest thing. Like, it pops up on Facebook that duplex that is identical to R2 that sits next door to the two we're under contract on pops up for sale. I'm like, holy heck. I'm call you. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, dude, it's on the Facebook group. It's for sale.
I think I'm yelling at you. Hang up and reach out to him right now. Send him a message. You got to call him. We got to get it.
So
it takes.
We I contact the guy. We love this guy. By the way, that's the other thing is sometimes these relationships is nice that one can lead to many in some respects, or at least in this case, one has led to a couple. And so we'll talk about that. But I'm messaging the guy. I'm like, he's not messaging me back. I mean, I'm going to use like Facebook messengers because no phone, just says something like that.
Right.
So finally I'm like, here's my phone number. He finally gives me a call and he's like, hey, I'm actually curious if who was buying those two or who owned those two next door anyway. He said, I'll meet you next day, which is a Saturday. I'll meet you and give you all first dibs on it since you're brand. And so we knew the asking price. We knew what we were paying for the ones next door. We knew that this one wasn't
fixed up
updated at all.
Right.
Turned out to also have not been lived in for over a year.
Yeah. Which presents its own unique issues, which we'll talk on later, I'm sure.
But anyway, we get it. So we see that's the price. You were busy, so you couldn't even come. You were like, well, if it fixed all these parameters, and I obviously look at HVACs and furnaces and roofs a lot as far as just knowing ages and things and whether they're in good shape. I don't know anything about that other than those. But I'm like, okay, all the major things looked like they're fine, functional. There's nothing. I mean, there's a lot of cosmetic work that needed to be done for sure.
That's an understatement. Yeah. But I think that goes back to the trust in a partnership and being smart about who you choose as your partner. Because I couldn't be that at a teaching event that I had to go to, but you're sending me pictures, and we know what
it can look like. Especially this being our first one, we're like, okay, this is what the ones that door.
Right, and we know like what they're renting for, et cetera. So it was interesting that. I don't know, just kind of the first two drove the third one being a good deal. And so, trusting your partner, and you're sending me pictures, and, we decide not even talking really on the phone, like, hey, let's make an offer on it. And so you offered him what he was going to ask for.
Well, I go back. I don't even have a contract. I mean, again, this is no realtor involved in this.
We don't have a contract or we have no idea how we're going to pay for it.
So that's the other part.
Yeah.
So I call my buddy who does a lot of real estate investing. He sends me we get a contract he's a lawyer and stuff like that. So, I trusted his contract a lot. And so edited it, looked it over, scanned through, read through everything, edited some details. They're not, purchase contracts aren't huge in that, very long in that sense, but
right.
We were able to kind of edit for our own entity. We obviously had an entity set up. We kind of set that up in an LLC kind of thing already. And I'm like, I told the guy, yeah, we're good on that price. We'd done a handshake. I go back to the house. I edit it. I send it to him for signature. He signs it. All right, we're under contract for actually, at first I call our buddy Josh, our realtor, Josh Lynch, episode 1. Go back and listen to him. And I was like, he's like, just get it on 30-day close. I'm like, okay. So I get it on 30-day close. We get the contract. We're signed. Sweet. We're under contract now on 3 at the same time. We still haven't closed on any of them.
Right.
And I also have no idea how I'm going to pay for this third one.
The bank that's financing the first 2 has no idea that we're offering on the third, which, don't tell Chris that yet, but now he knows. And so it was interesting. And I think that made me more nervous than you, because I think you had talked to enough real estate people. You knew that, like, hey, we can work this out. There's options out there. And I was like, what did we just do? I think it hit me that night. Like, what did we just do? We just offered on a duplex and we have no idea how we're going to pay for it. But again, it goes back to,
that was the craziest 30 days. That was about 30 days. Well, I mean, it's probably less than 30 days because we figured it was about 2 weeks. Yeah. We had 2 weeks before we finally figured out. Was it 2 weeks or a week? It was like somewhere around maybe 10 days. I don't know. We'll say 10 days, something like that. Right. We're figuring out. I'm going through. Okay, so I have a lot more connections with different things, and trying to figure out. All right, we can figure out hard money lending somehow. Surely we can. Yeah. Everybody seems to have it. So I'm calling all kinds of connections I might have, and everybody's like, oh, I'm tied up right now, or I don't have anybody that's got, that's wanting to do that right now, or all my funds, et cetera. And finally get down to hard money guy on the Facebook group, many are familiar with, that shout out to Jim. And he gives us a shot. And it's like, well, first of all, Jim's, you're a hard man to get if you're listening to this, get hold of sometimes, which I know you're busy, but no, it ended up working out well. We were working with him, and he gave us, we still had to put a decent, again, it's our first one. I get that. And so we had to put in, I don't know, 25, 35, somewhere in there. I don't know.
Well, it was, and it goes back to, I'm an outcome driven person. So for me, the big moments are when we purchase a property, we come under contract, we have something fixed up, a tenant moves in. But those months of joining the Facebook group and making connections with people, that allowed that when it was fast paced and we had to come up with a solution in 10 days, that we had those connections to reach out to. Mostly you, and that's one.
And you can find them anywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
There's probably Facebook groups like this all over the place.
Yeah, you just have to understand that that's all part of the process too. Yeah. So even when you feel discouraged because you haven't gotten that property or that deal fell through or whatever, but you made a new connection with somebody, that is, you're growing in that area as well. And so Jim, was very kind to help us out because the first time we'd used a hard money lender, he did a substantial percentage of what we did. We put about $35,000 into the purchase price, and then we were gonna fund the updates. You're doing the math over there. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. And so
no, it was like 40.
We put 40 in.
I think it was like 40, 45, somewhere in that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Anyhow,
that sounds right. But anyway, so we put some money into it. He didn't do, the full amount, but that was okay. We were just thankful we were able to do that, and thankful that we couldn't have obviously, crossed the finish line with that one without his help. So he comes through.
Yeah, he comes through. So we're good to go. We're working on it closing. And then our appraisals come back from the other one.
Which is crazy. So not only did they meet what we were concerned it would not meet what we offered, it actually substantially went over.
It went over by what? 24,000 each?
24,000 on each property went over. And so now we know that.
Now we're under contract for properties that already have 24,000 more than we thought.
Right. And we know now that the third unit or the third building is a great deal because our ownership of the first two is going to drive this appraisal of the third one.
Honestly, our third deal was like probably another single, but probably turned into at least a triple. At least double. I mean, we financed and didn't get quite all of it back, but we were in it for very, very little.
Very little. We'll make back in less than a year what we have in it, which is
probably
incredible.
A triple then.
Yeah. Oh, at least
home runs if you don't have anything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden that comes back and much higher, and we're like, holy cow! Now our third unit is just that much better. We end up closing again. We're kind of keeping things close to the cards close to hand in some respect, and We closed what?
We closed on a Friday on the first two.
Yep.
And then we closed on Monday on the third one.
So we went from 0 to 6 units in 4 days.
Yeah, how about that? And then it was like, oh gosh.
And it was like, now we've got work to do.
Yeah.
And of course, 2 of them were updated, and we had to get some tenants. So, and again, there's a lot of resources out there, but you figuring out operation. We had to, when you get a partnership, there's an operating agreement as far as laying out. We'd already had a lot of this set up, getting ready for the closings and so forth, and so forth. So that's the stuff you can find out about. But I mean, it was a crazy whirlwind. So. I mean,
yeah, it was crazy. So, and we had already discussed, roles. So we were ready as soon as we took ownership. We knew exactly what was going on. I was going to manage the day-to-day of the properties. And so I was ready to take that on and get the third and fourth one filled. And then we kind of tackled 5 and 6 together, which was a really fun process. It was 5
and 6 being the third unit. So we did what, 50? How much we said probably about 50% of the work we did ourselves, maybe?
I mean, I'm going to give us some credit. I think we did more than that. We hired a painter from a time standpoint, and then there was obviously plumbing and electric work that needed to be done. But all the, drywall repairs, laying of flooring, we did have some hardwood refinished, but laying of flooring, painting cabinets, changing hardware on doors, all cosmetic stuff we did ourselves. On 5 and 6. So we took ownership in mid-March of all 3 buildings, and our goal was to get number 5 filled as quickly as possible while we're both still doing full-time jobs.
When did we get that one filled?
She moved in by May 1st.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of time where the rest of March was getting the first 2 buildings filled. We had those 2 vacancies, and so we put those up, listed those, went through the background checks, et cetera, and then got those filled by April. And then April, we really worked on, it was my spring break, the first week of April, we started tackling unit number 5. And that came down to the wire. I remember the day before she moved in, we're both, you had a family thing, you've been there a ton, but I'm finishing it up and you come back from the family thing and we're literally just sprinting, carrying stuff from number 5 over to just dumping at number 6 because we hadn't started fixing up number 6 yet, just so it could be ready.
And number 6 was already the biggest dump, so we just made the dump worse.
Yeah,
filling it with more stuff.
Yeah, it was quite a dumping ground. So number 5 fills on May 1st, and we were good then. Like we weren't going to lose money. And so at
least we had income coming in for that one, because again, that's still on hard money at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, and we knew that once we got 5 filled and that lease signed, we could start the process of getting the bank involved on the third building. And so then May and beginning of June, we really started tackling number 6. Listed numbers. We were able to list number 6 because we obviously had finished product pictures from number 5,
right?
And so we were able to start those conversations and getting people lined up for number 6, and then. Obviously, like I said, get the bank involved and start moving towards closing because we wanted to pay off the hard lender, obviously, sooner rather than later.
And this shouldn't be a discouragement by any means because there's always opportunity in any market. But I think what has made these deals, for us at least, a home run, when I never think thought we could get, is the fact that how much the market, economy, inflation, et cetera, has changed everything in that 3-month window. That from the time we were able to we filled the last unit. What was the rents were already another almost $200?
Yeah, I think they were a little under market. I think when we took and they probably hadn't been under market for long. But I think by the time we took ownership, the rents were a little under market on the first 2
we were able
buildings.
to move them up a little bit.
And so as we filled number 3 and number 4, we bumped them up a little bit. We haven't raised the rent of existing tenants, but the new ones we have. And then by the time we did number 5, it was another. Another $50 on number 5, and the number 6 was even higher. So we've raised them a couple $100 just in a short amount of time. Like you said, the market has driven that, and so that you're right. That took what we thought was a triple, honestly, to a home run because they're cash flowing more than we even expected. From the get go. Yeah.
And so again, back to connections with people. They've got rental property and they're wanting to unload and creating those relationships. I know there's a lot of people on this podcast that have had those kind of stories, but the same gentleman, his family connections wise, owned another single family home on that same court. And so we actually go here in a few hours to go hard money loan on that one. But we are going to be under contract on a single family across the street.
And he was good to us because I think you briefly mentioned that when he showed us the duplex, he had several of the showings lined up, and I think could have probably gotten more for the duplex, but he loved that we were young investors. He loved that we were kind of getting to the game that he was getting out of.
And he's really been impressed with what we've done to the other. And we painted the outside of everything, the other ones, and really started to make the court pop a lot more.
And he's been impressed. The neighbors have come over multiple times. I mean, people love it when you come in and make properties better and make their neighborhood better. And so he was great to us on that one. And then he was pretty much like, hey, come to me when you're done with the duplex and make an offer on this house across the street. We want to sell it. And so we did, and that was a very easy process again. And so, like you said, connections have snowballed and turned it into kind of something that's rolling along now.
So yeah, we will here in a few hours go from add another unit. Still remains. We're gonna have some long conversations about long term or short term with it, but yeah, it's been good in that sense. And also doing the work. We're gonna probably not do as much of the work on future ones like this potentially, but having done as much work as we were so much hands-on with this first one, I think was invaluable as well, right?
Yeah, I think except for, the work you need a licensed contractor to do, like electric and plumbing I mentioned earlier, we've now laid our hands on every aspect of the property. And so I think we have a good understanding now of how everything works and kind of what the standard is to get things to. This single-family home is going to be another fix it up. But like you said, I think we're going to hire out a lot of the work. But I would not trade those first 2 units we fixed up for anything, even though it was a lot of time, and it was both of them came down to the wire. It was, we were fixing stuff the day before the tenant moved in. And there have been, like you mentioned, the building was empty for over a year. So there have been things that have come up that we did not expect for sure. But it's been such a great learning process. Yeah. And honestly, I think we both enjoy the work. If we didn't have full-time jobs and families and whatnot, I think we would love to do more and more of it. But it's been good, and I think it set us up for success in future situations.
Yeah, in some senses, probably going from 0 to 6 units, learning how to property manage while also renovating at the same time. Maybe not ideal, but
if I was
we knew that like we could get through this, right?
It would not be that.
Like this is not how it's always going to be in that sense.
And I think we kept telling each other, our families, this is an investment. This is getting us off the ground. We're not just starting at step 1. We really kind of jumped in at step 6 or 7. It feels like, And so it's like if we can just get through these couple months of stressful, then we are, set up for success.
And there's always going to be hiccups, as we've discovered. I mean, we don't have to go through all the stories, but there's always
some doozies, yeah.
Always, but I think the one doozy you never want to hear is when the
kitchen sink gurgles.
Yes, and so we have our tenant out of that fit in unit 5, that third duplex.
Number 5 had moved in, and we were doing work on number 6. You and I were there.
Thankfully, we were there.
Yeah, that was another blessing.
Number 6.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff you can't. It's just been the favor.
Yeah.
But we were working on number 6 laying flooring, and we hear this gurgling noise, and we kind of stop and both stand up and look at each other, and then we look towards the kitchen sink, and water is coming back up the kitchen sink.
Which, if you know anything about that or insurance or whatever, is never a good
your
sign.
Insurance background, I think, led you down some dark roads thinking like, oh my gosh, our sewer. Well, and these are older buildings. We knew that when we first purchased the property, we had some plumbing updated. It's old galvanized pipe, and we had all the fittings redone. But we
also had the property inspected. We didn't want to assume we knew everything. So we paid a little bit out of pocket to get them inspected to kind of get a little bit of a picture of everything.
Right. And they had told us that, plumbing, these are old pipes, and at some point you might need to update some stuff. And so I think you wisely thought, oh my gosh, this could be a sewer line issue. And so we immediately reached out to the plumber, and I immediately reached out to the plumber and then reached out to the tenant next door. I was like, hey, have you had any plumbing issues? And she's like, actually, yeah, my sink was backing up a little bit this morning. And so, oh gosh, because both units.
That's the thing with sewer line, I know too. It's like if something's there, it could be fine, but then after you start using it again, those problems and shows start coming out, and you're like. So that's why I was really afraid of. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, we knew that, if it was something down the line, it would make sense that after someone was living there and showering and dishes and all that it would start to show up. So we reached out to the plumber, and, they said they're going to get out there as soon as they can to take a look at it. And I, asked the tenant number 5 to be cautious about dishes and shower time, et cetera, while we got it looked at. And so I didn't hear back from the plumber for probably 36, 48 hours. And so I went back over to the property to check on the plumbing. And I had a note left for me on the cabinet, and it said, please be careful what you shove down the kitchen sink or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I took a picture of it and sent it to the plumber, and I was like, did this come from you? And he texted me back right away and said, actually, that was my uncle. So I guess his uncle does some of the plumbing work with him or whatever. And he then sent me a picture of him his uncle was holding the snake they put down the drain, and it was just littered with rags, like multiple rags that he had obviously pulled from the line. And so I call him right away. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? And he said, that picture doesn't even do it justice. He said that was a small fraction of what they pulled out. He said there were at least 40 rags we pulled from the line, and that was when then we went to the the front, went into the sewer line and pulled some more out. And he said, I think we got all of them. And I said, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, where did this come from? And so the plumber's working theory originally was that perhaps, an angry tenant under the previous owner before they moved out had just shoved a bunch of rags down the drain on their way out the door. And then, they get flushed down a little bit, and then eventually one sticks and they start to back up. And so you have somebody living there, you see it pop up. I later asked him if it could have been something like baby wipes, et cetera, because a lot of people don't, think you can flush things down, that you can, especially these old pipes. And so he said it could have been that. And so we've since educated our tenants, make sure they're all aware of what can be flushed and not flushed, et cetera. So it could have been any number of things. Our current tenants have been awesome, but it was not what you were expecting. One of those things that you're
in that sense, what I'm saying is expect some things to.
Yeah.
It's not going to be always an easy time.
And I think we're both really good at being calm and staying steady and not losing our mind in those situations, which I think you have to. There's always a solution. You just got to get through it and figure it out.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. So we'll add to the 7th units and loving real estate investing so far. And especially as like I said, the economy, everything's kind of changing, and knowing it's still a much safer investment, where I think there's a lot of people not knowing or not trusting the stock market. I mean, we still diversify and having investments in some of those fields and markets as well and stuff like that. But it really does. It's kind of more of the tried and true investment side of things as far as that goes. It's not maybe necessarily as much ups and downs in that sense, but yeah, it's interesting. We don't have an 8th unit or more on the line after this.
Send it to us if you got one. We're looking to expand for sure.
That's exactly right. We've got some other dreams, I think, that I'll divulge if we ever start down those paths, maybe here in the next year or two, if that happens, that are a much even more grander scale in some respects. Again, I'm kind of crazy like that sometimes. I'm more of the dreamer for sure in some respects. And then it's more like, all right, where's the reality lie? And Andrew's like, okay.
Well, I get our tasks done day to day, but you keep us moving forward. That's why it makes us a good team.
Before we wrap up, favorite restaurant in Lexington?
We're a big BHG family, so you talk about investments. Her dad is invested in BHG, so we go to BHG all the time. Also a huge Carson's fan, although in the springtime it was like impossible to get in. It was like 2 weeks out. You those ribs that you introduced me to are amazing. So Carson's would probably be our go-to, I would say. But downtown is exploding. With all kinds of good food. So anywhere down there would be great.
It's changed a lot since we were kids, that's for sure.
I know. It used to be you don't go down there. Now it's like the hit place to be.
Not at all.
I know.
But like I said, appreciate you coming on the show. I know, like I said, hopefully this encouraged somebody that's listening to this that maybe either keep going or maybe nothing's worked out initially trying to get into real estate. But it's not going to be easy. It's not like it's just a quick buck or something like that. It's going to take a lot of hard work, analyzing markets, looking into things, a lot of closed doors in some respects. But it seemed like, especially, like I said, getting on base, getting through that into that first one, I think was the hardest part and stuff like that. And so from there, we've had a lot more trust from people and so forth, or those relationships we built throughout the whole process of renovating with the different types of contractors and so forth. You're obviously been great at that and so forth. So it's been awesome.
Well, like you said, be encouraged. There's people out there that want to help you. Reach out, take every small step. And, I think it's possible for anybody.
I couldn't do it without you.
Same to you.
Appreciate it. Hey, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And everybody, check us back next week for another exciting episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. And subscribe if you will, and we'll see you next time.
To learn more about this podcast, visit our page at keystothecommonwealth.com. To connect with Landry regarding insuring your investment portfolio, email Landry at novainsuranceGroup.com or call 859-687-2004.